Support for WUWM podcast comes from Life Navigators, your disability partner, offering disability services for over 75 years. More on their family resources at lifenavigators.org or their helpline, 414-774-6255.
From 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR, this is Lake Effect. I'm Joy Powers. Today we'll explore how Mayor Daniel Hoan reshaped the city as part of our series on the Milwaukee Socialists. And we'll talk with the Wisconsin author of a new novel that takes place in the aftermath of climate disasters.
Between hope and despair, hourly, sometimes. So I try to write it into the work.
We'll chat with comedian Paula Poundstone about how she formed her signature audience interactions into her stand-up.
When I first started doing it, I just, I felt like it was, an indication of how lousy I was as a comic. And then one day, I don't know, it just dawned on me that, wait a minute, that was really the best part of the whole set.
All of that is coming up on Lake Effect. This is Lake Effect from 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Joy Powers, and thank you so much for joining us. Milwaukee is known for its deep ties to socialism. It was the first U.S. city to elect a socialist mayor, and was the first place to elect a socialist to Congress. But their rise to power was rocky, and their status as a third party often made progress an uphill battle. Last week, we learned about the city's first socialist mayor, Emil Seidel, and what he was able to accomplish during his short time in office. Today, we'll look at a mayor with a much longer tenure and explore how the party evolved during his time in office. In 1916, Milwaukee elected its second socialist mayor. He would go on to have the longest tenure of any socialist administration in U.S. history, serving the city for 24 years as mayor. And his time in office would be marked by many firsts, landmark accomplishments that made Milwaukee the envy of industrialized U.S. cities. But by the end of his time in office, the Social Democrats would all but disappear from the city's political landscape. That mayor was Daniel Hoan. Here's historian John Gerda.
He'd gotten a UW degree, having never gone to high school. He was an adult special student. So his dad died when he was 13. His parents divorced. So he was hardscrabble. He's kind of a Lincoln-esque quality to Dan Hoan.
Hoan had started his political career in 1910 as part of the Socialists' clean sweep in Milwaukee. He was elected city attorney and started working on a key priority for the party, cleaning up government corruption. Moneyed interests and companies still held a lot of sway in city government. Hoan set his sights on a company that had monopolized key utilities in Milwaukee, the Milwaukee Electric Railway and Light Company. It controlled the city's electricity and gas, as well as its streetcars. The Socialists believed the utilities should be controlled by the public, not a private company. But the Electric Railway and Light Company represented just one entity among many that the Socialists were targeting.
The term that you always use in terms of what the Socialists believed in governing is public enterprise. So enterprise in as red-blooded a sense of dynamism and forward-thinkingness as any capitalist, but for the public interest. And what that meant was practically public parks, public ports, public schools, public libraries. So those were all things that were part of the Socialist Party platform.
The fight with the utility played out in both City Hall and courtrooms. But the Milwaukee Socialists had other issues to fix, including the city's water. As heavy industry had moved into Milwaukee, the rivers had become polluted with runoff and raw sewage. Even Lake Michigan had become contaminated, which was a big issue for the city's drinking water, as history teacher John Deisinger explains.
The idea that you turn on your faucet, you can drink what comes out of your faucet, and it's not going to give you a horrible illness is something we like to take for granted. That was not something you could take for granted, even if you had running water in the early 1900s. That was a good way to give yourself a terrible infectious disease. And so this effort, here's this sort of theme with the sewer socialists, is this idea that if there's a matter of public concern, it is the duty and the responsibility of the city to speak to that through public expenditure and public effort. We're going to fix the water supply.
Mayor Hoan picked up where Milwaukee's first socialist mayor, Emil Seidel, had left off, relying on expertise and cutting-edge methods for water treatment. The plan would take time, money, and, most importantly, property. It was a problem the socialists would continue to encounter.
There were constant fights at getting the land needed for these improvements, whether those were parks, whether that was sewers, whether that was gas plants, whatever it was. There were constant squabbles over land.
They set their sights on the lakefront, specifically Jones Island. But it already had residents, Kashubs, an ethnic group from Poland that had created an informal fishing village on the land. In a historical small walking moment, a familiar foe for the socialists had tried to evict the Kashubs decades earlier, the owners of the Bayview rolling mill. Here's John Gerda.
So they claimed prior ownership of land going up to the end of Jones Island where the sewage plant is today. And that was contested in court by the Jones Islanders, and their guardian or their advocate was Victor Berger. So things being kind of circular here. The mill they didn't want to pay him. They just wanted to condemn that land and evict him. So it was war. Then finally, 1914, the city paid the islanders, and they left.
The plant opened in 1926, and it came with the added bonus of creating revenue with a new product, Milwaukee Organic Nitrogen, known as Milorganite. Milwaukee became the first U.S. city with a modern sewage treatment facility, and the first city to sell the byproduct as fertilizer.
It was groundbreaking. We were the first to do it. I think once you get past the idea of a sewage plant, anything goes. And what that is sort of the dried, dead bacteria that were used to purify the sludge. So I think it was a very creative act of civic recycling. You take your own waste and you turn that to green dollars.
With the redevelopment of Jones Island, the Hoan administration was also able to create the Port of Milwaukee in the Outer Harbor. The new port was necessary to accommodate the ever larger ships coming to Milwaukee, then known as the machine shop of the world. In a fitting tribute to the man who made it happen, the bridge that goes over Jones Island was named in Mayor Hoan's honor. But the Hoan administration's transformation of the lakefront didn't stop with Jones Island. For decades, the socialists have been talking about the need for more green space for the average Milwaukeean. Even before they came into power, the city had been working on acquiring land for the parks. But it was during the Hoan administration that everything came together under the guidance of the city's first socialist treasurer, Charles Whitnell.
He was a landscape architect, landscape planner by profession. And he became the secretary of the commission on both the city and the county. So he was the dominant influence on land use in Milwaukee from probably the 20s into the 40s. So he was as visionary as Emil Seidel, someone who believed devoutly, fervently, religiously in the need of public green space. So he wanted everyone to live within walking distance of a park.
Under Whitnell's guidance, the city created one of the largest park systems in any U.S. city at the time, including 6 main parks that remain today: Washington, Riverside, Mitchell, Humboldt, Kosciuszko, and Lake.
If you look at the 1923 map that Whitnell put together and today's park system, it's really pretty close, very close. So the result was today we have 15,000 acres of public green space, which is 5 times per capita more than the city of Chicago has.
During his 24 years as mayor, Daniel Hoan had been able to transform the city's lakefront, clean the drinking water, and even create the first municipally funded public housing in the U.S. with the creation of garden homes in 1923. For a time, Milwaukee became a pinnacle of good governance, in large part thanks to Mayor Hoan.
A lot of what he did was basically turn what had been a graft-ridden, kind of a boss-riddled society into a paragon of good government. So it's hard to imagine today, but Milwaukee won during his years award after award as the safest, healthiest, and cleanest big city in America.
The Socialists had completely reshaped the city during their time in power, but none of their successes came easily, as Dysinger explains.
The Socialist position in Milwaukee is always kind of precarious. They hold office for a long period of time, but it is always contested. This is a movement that has governing authority, has legitimacy, has a strong base, but they're fighting for it every chance they get. They are constantly embattled here.
And global events had divided the party. By the time Hoan was sworn in as mayor, World War I was dividing the community. Ethnic Germans and Slavs who had made up the base of the Social Democratic Party in Milwaukee viewed the conflict very differently, and their pacifist beliefs had put a target on the party itself. Milwaukee's own Victor Berger became the first congressman convicted of espionage for publicizing his anti-war views. Despite continuing to win re-election, the U.S. Congress twice refused to seat him until his conviction was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court.
Berger is essentially barred from Congress, so Milwaukeeans elect him anyway. They send him back to Washington. He gets kicked out again. They elect him again. So it was kind of, I guess that says something about the Milwaukee electorate. They were not going to be told what to do.
At the same time, there was the Russian Revolution, inspired by many of the same ideologies that had inspired the Social Democrats. Dysinger explains.
There's a big split in the American Socialist Party. And the question, to oversimplify, is, are we for the Soviets or are we against the Soviets? And if you're for the Soviets, you join the Communist Party. And if you're against the Soviets, you stay in the Socialist Party. That does not protect the Socialists from accusations of being communists.
Most of Milwaukee's leading Social Democrats were staunchly anti-communist because they were anti-authoritarians. But this stance revealed another division in the party. During this time, the Milwaukee Socialists had been given the nickname the Sewer Socialists, inspired in part by the sewage plant they were so proud of. But it was also an accusation of pragmatism and complacency, as historian Ames McGinnis explains.
There are other socialists who argue that any effort that wasn't focused on leading armed revolution against a capitalist society in the present was a waste of time. Increasing wages for workers was a waste of time. Ensuring that working class children had a place to play was, from their perspective, a waste of time, or even worse than a waste of time, it was counterproductive because it was making capitalism more palatable, when what these socialists wanted was to bring capitalist society to a crisis, which they hoped that they could then exploit to overturn capitalism altogether through a revolution.
Then there was the Great Depression. Under the guidance of Hoan and other socialists, Milwaukee didn't take on the same debts that hampered other U.S. cities. In fact, the Hoan administration was able to keep the city solvent during the crisis and provide jobs through work programs. The New Deal, headed by Democratic President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, helped many Milwaukeeans through the crisis. But it did something else too, as Dysinger explains.
The socialists bitterly complain in the 1930s that FDR is stealing all their best ideas for the New Deal. There's a grain of truth to that. And so as more and more of these sort of social democratic ideas are being incorporated into the New Deal through the alphabet agencies of the New Deal, more and more Milwaukeeans are sort of like, well, just vote for the Democrats.
By the election of 1940, there were far fewer Social Democrats in office. The party was splintering, and it was about to lose one of its most prominent members. Here's Ames McGinnis.
Socialist electoral fortunes kind of go up and down in this period. There's a brief zenith again at the very beginning of the Great Depression, but Daniel Hoan loses his last attempt to be reelected as mayor, and he loses to a conservative, quote-unquote, nonpartisan candidate, Carl Seidler. And Daniel Hoan then left the Socialist Party and became a Democrat.
While Hoan's time as mayor was defined more by its successes than losses, he was never able to achieve one of his biggest goals when he first took office, bringing the Milwaukee Electric Railway and Light Company under public control. In an ironic twist of fate, the beating heart of the Milwaukee Socialists, Victor Berger, died after being hit by one of the company's streetcars. Today, that company is known as We Energies, and the fight to make it public has continued under a new group of socialists, the Democratic Socialists of America.
One of the major campaigns of the DSA right now is what's called the Power to the People campaign, which is an effort to municipalize We Energies. Dan Hoan speaks at length about how he wanted to get the utility under the control of the city in Milwaukee, that he wanted electricity under the control of the city. There's many different court cases that kind of hang him up. He's not able to get full support in a referendum to make it happen. It just doesn't quite get there.
Although Hoan left the party after his tenure, his work as mayor remains a testament to the Milwaukee Socialists' ambitions and accomplishments. His time in office saw the completion of many of the party's biggest goals for the city and redefined what life looked like for the average Milwaukeean.
There's this famous picture of Dan Hoan on the cover of Time magazine about, supposedly the best mayor in America, and it says underneath, he gives all the credit to Karl Marx. And that was often taken as being sort of tongue-in-cheek, and to an extent it was, but to an extent it wasn't. I mean, the sewer socialists were socialists for a reason. There's a reason that they ran and governed as socialists and not just as progressive Democrats, because they essentially took the radical and Marxist analysis of capitalism and a capitalist society very, very seriously. And the efforts they made were to improve the lives of working people, but it was also to pursue this idea of a cooperative socialist economy.
While Hoan may have left the Socialists weren't quite done with Milwaukee. Join us next week when we learn about Milwaukee's last socialist mayor, how he literally reshaped the city, and what socialism looks like in Milwaukee today. You just heard the third story in our 4-part series on the Milwaukee Socialists. At WUWM.com, you can find the first 2 parts of the series and see examples of early socialist publications and posters. If you need some flexibility for when you listen, you can listen to Lake Effect on demand. Find it as a podcast wherever you like to listen, to download and enjoy on the go. In about 15 minutes, we'll visit a Milwaukee barbershop that's working to improve health outcomes in the community.
It's important to recognize the influence that you have in the community, and I think that's what I did. So I decided to use that influence to try to, get as many men in particular, but women as well, tested early for colon cancer, prostate cancer, knowing if they have hypertension or...
But first, we'll sit down with the author of a new novel that explores how people respond to climate disasters. That's coming up next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. You're listening to Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Joy Powers. Jim DeVita is a well-known name in Wisconsin's theater world. He's a core company member of American Players Theater in Spring Green, which was recently selected to receive the 2026 Regional Theater Tony Award. In addition to acting and directing, DeVita is also a writer. Under the pen name James Cleary, he recently released a post-apocalyptic thriller called Sanctuary. It takes place in a world damaged by climate disasters, where some survivors retreat to a bunker. WUWM's Susan Bentz spoke with DeVita in a bookstore in Spring Green, where he does some of his writing. He begins by describing what the book is about.
There's the young woman, Maya, who journals throughout. And I really hear the story through her. I think she's for me, the heart of the book. And she's as conflicted and confused as anybody else about, she sees what's happening, what's wrong. She also sees how she's been complicit in her own life in some of the things that happen. So I love her because she's cursed with self-awareness, and she calls herself on her own stuff sometimes too, which I like.
And more than one character shares that in their own distinct personality, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you see the relationships that form with a group, the people that are trying to get into the bunker, and the way that those relationships evolve. And it's also, you just get little snippets, but you feel these people.
I'm so glad that you're getting it's so wonderful when somebody says they get what you've been trying to do, So, and because it's a big cast, as I said, it's a big ensemble, because I will always use theater references.
So, the title, Sanctuary can has a variety of meanings. Does it mean more than one thing to you within the book itself?
Yeah, I think we chose it because, and again, I went through a couple of titles, and my agent and I eventually settled on, and we think because it's a complicated word. It's both safety too, but also in sanctuary, and I have some definitions of it in the book. There's also sometimes an obligation to pay homage to the person giving you sanctuary. So that's where it gets a little complicated there. So that resonated with me and Maya says this in the book, she has opinions about the way this billionaire has spent his life, but she's alive because of him. So right there, it's a complicated relationship. She's aware that she's in this bunker, and the reason she's eating and breathing air is because of how this man prepared. But so there's no answer to that, and she wrestles with that, as we all wrestle with, our own. And I speak for myself. I'm, trying not to use too much Amazon, but I do, and those and that's all connected.
So, how long was the writing process? How many years was this in the making?
This was rather for me on the faster side. So it was 3 years basically from idea to publishing, and that's, from my experience, that's good. My other books, because I wasn't writing full time for the other books, I was still writing just like 2 or 3 hours a day. So this one I did write full time once I got an agent. So probably 18 months of really getting to a clean draft, and then the time it takes to actually physically make the book and design, and which was really fun to be more involved in that and have a team behind me this time.
As you wrote this, did you become increasingly concerned, alarmed, energized by, in other words, what are we doing to ourselves here?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I'm trying to avoid despair. I think many of us in the world are, with what's going on in the world today in our country, and not just. But I think a good, at least a therapeutic way for me, is to work it out. Not work it out. I mean, I'm writing it into the stories, and it's not even like let me take this issue and write about it. If I'm writing about something in the world today, which this happens in the near future. And if it's going to smack of authenticity, you need to take in what's happening, I feel, or I need to take in what's happening in the world. And this is happening, these kind of climate catastrophes. And, the Oglala Aquifer, there is really trouble going on there. And so these things that I've used are actually happening. People are actually building bunkers. People are accelerationists, So, yes, I'm really, I have children. I'm going to be a grandpa. And I've just learned my daughter is pregnant. I'm going to be a grandfather, so I'm not just concerned for my kids, but for my grandchildren now, of how we're going to come together as a country again. And there are bad guys and good guys, in any kind of story like this. But I do try to give viewpoints from both sides, and I don't try to. I do. I'm not a fan of in theater or writing of things that tell me how to live, or we know what's right usually. But I do like to provoke, I like stories that provoke me to think, what would I do? And I think that's the main thing I want to do with my kind of work is to provoke conversation and thought, and the readers, and audience, they're all smart and they know how to wrestle with those things. Like I said, I go between hope and despair hourly sometimes. So I try to write it into the work.
So I heard you speak to actually a colleague at APT, and you mentioned that you have a note that your third grade teacher wrote to you saying...
That's my sixth grade teacher, Mrs. Boyd. How do you know that?
Research, man.
Well, I guess the first thing I ever wanted to be was a writer. Just because I remember in sixth grade they asked you, and I wanted to be a journalist, and I'm not sure if I even knew what that meant, but... And I still have a little thing. It's on these little autograph books. I don't remember. They used to be like a little zipper. And she said, perhaps one day you'll be a great writer, James. And I was just a boy. So I still have that. I'm still holding that up there. So I like that perhaps. I keep that up there. And it's next to a Hemingway quote, which is, I love it because I look at it almost every day. It says, "Do not worry. You have always written. You will write again. Just write one true sentence." It's just those four little things. So, and it works when I get overwhelmed or something. It's just write one true sentence, and it almost invariably leads to another sentence.
Do you think you're going to lean into writing more, or will you continue to act, direct, write plays? What do you feel like? What's coming for you?
I think, in in my fifth act, as I call it, I think I'll be leaning into this. I feel like I'm improving as a writer. I think I'll be stepping. Not that I won't continue to act, but I'll be stepping away from, I think, as much and concentrating on this, because I've spent 30 years writing just early in the mornings for 3 hours or so, and so now I write about 3 hours in the morning there, and then I spend another 3 or 4 hours here. I'm at a little bookstore right now. Because I get stir crazy after. I can't spend 8 hours in there,
So you've lived in a small Wisconsin community for a bunch of years now, and through that time you've done, aside from your acting gig and all of the other stuff, you were an EMT, a volunteer EMT person, right? So I'm just thinking, as you wrote the book, as you think about the book, as you talk with people about the book, does it resonate with you in a specific way as being somebody who's a part of a small community that you care about?
I do. I love it. I was an EMT for 15 years here, and then, and I feel like the book feels I think it feels like a victory for the town, which I love. Like our launch here had over 200 people in the guard. There was a standing room, and it's not just about me. It's like really felt like the town turned out. And Arcadia Bookstore here, I think they not only feel, but they feel like it's theirs, which is so lovely. And because like this book, we talk about the people trying to get into the bunker, and I think it can smack of, if you don't know it, it could sound like Mad Max kind of stuff, like these. And no, there's people trying to get in. They're farmers and they're construction workers, and the guy in the corner that runs the gas station, and they're people with kids and parents. So I specifically wanted to be about regular people.
So you mentioned earlier asking ourselves, what would we as individuals do? Throughout the book, and we don't want to give very much away at all, but there are times in which, though there's despair and different emotions going on, there are times when different characters on both sides say, why don't we just try to talk to each other? Why don't we see if we can come to an agreement?
Yeah. Isn't that what's happening in the world right now, in our country right now? When are we going to get back to being able to talk to each other? Because the book is a microcosm for many things to me, but people will see that if they want to see it, and it works on a thriller just as like that, or there's a lot of deeper stuff right beneath the sentence. It's kind of like some of those plays, like I'm sorry, I'm always mixing things, but it's like Othello or Romeo and Juliet. If anybody would just stop for a moment and talk, it wouldn't happen. And those stories are cautionary tales because people don't stop and talk. And that works with great storytelling too, but this book is about that. Also in the book, there's enough for everybody. And so when I would get lost in the writing of it, I have a touchstone kind of, I would come back to saying it's about overabundance versus want. People in need versus people with an overabundance. And why can't we figure something out about that? And that's not just materialistic stuff. And I miss the days when we could talk to people and absolutely disagree vehemently and still be able to sit down and talk with each other and not hate each other. And we need to get back to that. I don't know how we do that, but so again, the book is me working through all of those questions.
Jim DeVita is the author of Sanctuary, under the pseudonym James Cleary. He spoke with WUWM's Susan Bentz. There's a barbershop in Milwaukee that's doing a lot more than cutting hair. G's Clippers has been offering free health screenings for a few years. And now owner G. Smith has created a nonprofit foundation to take his mission a step further. Kim Shine brings us this story from our friends at Radio Milwaukee.
Every year, Tony McMurray goes to the doctor for his physical. And in between, he'll visit community health clinics like he's doing today at G's Clippers in Milwaukee.
What for me was a process of discovery. I needed to find out if I could rid myself of a stain I have as a result of some hot water that hit me a couple of years ago.
The 71-year-old says he's learned a lot from the barbershop pop-up clinics, including from a past visit that ultimately helped save his life.
I learned about colon cancer in this same environment and went and got my test, found that I did have prostate cancer, but that was from an event that took place right here.
For more than 5 years, G's Wellness Clinic has offered free screenings to anyone who comes in. Through partnerships with Network Health and Freighted and the Medical College of Wisconsin, health professionals can check blood pressure, give general nutrition and health advice, and connect clients to resources. Today's clinic,
I have a mole that I was concerned about on my leg,
is on skincare.
Most of us don't go to the doctor regularly like we should and take care of ourselves.
There's a steady flow of clients, and Dr. Shola Vaughn is on site. She's an associate professor of dermatology at Freighted and MCW.
The skin is really a window to what's going on underneath the skin, and it's hard to diagnose these things yourself or even with the help of AI. You really need a team. You need a primary care doctor, and then sometimes you need a dermatologist on the team.
These clinics help fill an access gap in the community, and now they're part of an even larger mission, G's MKE Foundation. The owner of G's Clippers, Gollin Smith, officially launched his nonprofit in March. And after 30 years of service in Milwaukee, it expands his focus on wellness, mentorship, and tackling health disparities in underserved communities of color.
It's important to recognize the influence that you have in the community. And that's what I did. So I decided to use that influence to try to, get as many men in particular, but women as well, tested early for colon cancer, prostate cancer, knowing if they have hypertension or pre-diabetic.
G was inspired to start the foundation after the loss of his father, who at 62 died from complications with colon cancer. He said his dad had never gotten a colonoscopy, tried diagnosing himself, and ended up in extreme abdominal pain.
When he went to the doctor, we found out he had advanced stage 4 colon cancer. And he lived a short time after that, not even 6 months. And nobody should really die from colon cancer. It's a preventable, illness, one of the most preventable cancers out along with prostate cancer. You just got to go get the screening.
When caught early, remission from colon or prostate cancer is possible. The American Cancer Society puts 5-year survival rates at around 90%, depending on when and where the disease is found.
I would love to normalize clinics and barbershops all across the country. It's needed. You got way too many guys dying at too early, from preventable illnesses.
G's network also supports events like the long-standing Real Men, Real Talk series, back-to-school drives, voter initiatives, and more. And right now, he says the foundation will support 4 main initiatives a year: a mental health workshop, a 5K run walk, a blood drive, and a pre-screening event. And it's this consistent, positive outreach that Tony McMurray and many others value.
A lot of the things that G's does, including what we're witnessing here today, is not something that we would automatically put on our calendars to go and do. You know what I mean? So in addition to this being something that's convenient for us, it also puts it in our face so that we'll go ahead and address it.
That story by Kim Shine comes from our friends at Radio Milwaukee. Coming up, we'll check in with comedian Paula Poundstone and learn how she developed her style of stand-up comedy. That's next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. This is Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Joy Powers. If you're a frequent listener to WUWM, chances are you're familiar with the voice of Paula Poundstone. She's a regular panelist on NPR's Wait, Don't Tell Me. And she also hosts the podcast Nobody Listens to Paula Poundstone. Poundstone's career spans stand-up comedy, radio, and voice acting. She'll be performing her stand-up in Lake Geneva this weekend. Lake Effect's Audrey Nowakowski spoke to her ahead of the show.
We'll start with some classic public radio talk. You've been a long-time regular panelist for Wait, Don't Tell Me on NPR, and you were at the last taping featuring Bill Curtis. So I'm just curious, what was it like to share the final stage with him? I know you've worked with him for decades. What was that final show like?
It was great. It was fun. And I have to say that the powers that be at Wait, Don't Tell Me did a wonderful job making a last show for Bill. This wasn't on air, but they had a marching band. And the marching band was really funny. They weren't sort of conventional. They had like funny hats. And I don't know, they were dressed sort of eclectically. And I hadn't even been told ahead of time that there was going to be a marching band. And I still was like, well, where's that noise coming from when they came in? It was pretty great. And Governor Pritzker made it, Bill Curtis Day, and he received a proclamation. And I think that Bill Curtis, who's a lovely man, I think that he was very touched. It was really nice.
That's good. He definitely needs a big send-off.
And he was, yeah. Well, he got multiple send-offs. I kept saying to them, you're wasting a lot of ideas here on Bill. I said, what about when I retire? You've already, now you can't do the marching band because you already did the marching band. His last, traveling show, because Wait, Don't Tell Me travels about once a month maybe. They go to, someplace else other than Chicago to record the show. And I was also on that show, and that was in San Diego. And they got Will Ferrell to come do Ron Burgundy, who's his character from Anchorman. And he was the Not My Job guest. And that was delightful. And it was a surprise for Bill, and he loved it.
I love that. What are your favorite things about working with Bill, or any standout memories from all the years of Wait with him?
Actually, just on a personal level, he's just a very, very kind man. He years ago, he met my son, and I called him at one point about an issue with my son, and he just always, every time I see him, he's like, and how's that going? And how is he? It couldn't be kinder. And that's nice. Most of us, maybe it's because when Bill arrives at the show at Wait, Don't Tell Me, he's not still working on his bluff story. Maybe that just makes him more accessible than the rest of us. But the rest of us are a little bit distracted generally. We're not asking after one another's children because we're like, oh, I still have to write this damn bluff story. And a lot of times the listeners do ask me about the Bluff the Listener game. The stories that are read in the Bluff the Listener game are written by the panelists who read them. Even the person who gets the real story has to write it up. But the others have to invent it out of whole cloth. And anyways, to me, it's homework. And so I'm always a little on edge over it. One time I was writing it during the show. I think that really upset Peter. Because I just didn't have it yet. You have to have an idea. I don't know how. I could never be a writer for a living because I can't guarantee when an idea is going to come to me. I mean, I can try to sort of make my brain fertile for receiving an idea, but I have no idea when an idea is going to flit across my brain. And sometimes it's not as prompt as I might like.
Can relate. And I mean, I know some comics will straight up write out their whole hour plus. What is kind of your methodology in prep? Because I know it changes a lot. You're constantly touring. I'm sure you're going through new ideas constantly. Is writing a big part of your prep, or are you more of like a bullet point kind of person?
More, I suppose, of a bullet point kind of a person, but I don't have a set for a couple of reasons. I think that the main reason is just it was never a technique that I was good at because memorizing is very hard for me. The whole time I would be on stage, my brow would be furrowed with the effort of remembering that set. And so I, really within my first couple of years, when I had only a few minutes of material to begin with, I relieved myself of that burden by luckily discovering that I could do it another way, but B, that I was much better doing it another way. So I very rarely do two shows in the same place on the same night, or even, two nights in the same place. There are guys that literally do the exact same thing night after night. And by the way, they do it brilliantly. It's not a criticism. It's not like you wouldn't be entertained by it. You would. They figured out that works for them. I just can't do that. Now, I have material, don't get me wrong. I have one joke that I've literally done, not every night, but many nights for 47 years. It was just like one of the first jokes I ever wrote. And it's kind of a go-to, and it's in my head, and it's reliable. And in fact, I tend to throw it out there when I feel the audience slipping away a little bit. I'm like, I'm going to give them the old International House of Pancakes joke. Hold on a second. Let me rummage around in my brain and find it. So I have material. I just don't have a set.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting distinction because when it comes to material, you've been a stand-up for a very long time, and you just mentioned one joke has a great 47-year shelf life, right? Do you find that material that you use has a pretty long shelf life, or do you just kind of naturally feel it out when you need to rotate something, or is each show kind of frenetic and you just get out there and go with the flow?
More the latter. My favorite part of any night, and I used to think this was somehow undisciplined or unprofessional of me, because it really came from an undisciplined, unprofessional place, which is I would step out onto stage, especially in the very beginning, and despite, hours and hours of trying to memorize a 5-minute set, I would step out onto stage, and because I'd get so nervous, I would forget everything I meant to say. And I was forced, therefore, to just sort of make stuff up as I went along. And part of the way I did that was by talking to individual audience members. And again, when I first started doing it, I just, I felt like it was, an indication of how lousy I was as a comic. And then one day, I don't know, it just dawned on me that, wait a minute, that was really the best part of the whole set. And at which point I started allowing for that, not necessarily forcing it, but allowing for it. And now, so it's kind of my act is a bit of a Prius. Sometimes I'm using gas, sometimes I'm using electricity, and I prefer electricity. So yeah, that works pretty good. So what happens is, I'll talk to an audience member. I do the time honored, where are you from? What do you do for a living? And somebody will say something that reminds me of something else, and then I'm off in that direction. Most of the time, most of what I say with the audience member is unique just to that night. I had these managers years ago that used to encourage me, and a lot of comics used this technique back then, which is we all walked around with cassette recorders, and we would record our acts so that so that we could critique ourselves by going back over this tape of our acts. But also, my managers used to say to me, "Well, if you invent stuff on stage, you want to be able to repeat it another time." I kind of feel the opposite of that. I feel like I like the idea that was just ours.
In addition to your stand-up work, voice acting, radio, you're also an activist for a lot of different things. What are some of the efforts you're prioritizing right now?
I feel that I am donating my life for a year to, not just getting out the vote. Yes, that is very, very important. And it's probably the main way that we are going to restore and secure our democracy. But I would say overall, restoring and securing our democracy. And I kind of sort of headed in this direction a little bit. Last year, I started 50 days prior to New Year's Eve. I started this really silly video series daily. I had this giant advent calendar, but it was counting down until New Year's Eve. And there was a box, just like in an advent calendar, except for this was like a big box with a prize in it for every day. And I would say to people on each of the videos, I would say, I'm a little concerned that people aren't excited about the new year, because people have gotten to where we sort of dread every day, because every day some other, horrible, shaming, awful thing happens in our name as Americans, or to us as Americans. And so this was the premise, was that I was, ginning people up for excitement for our future. And in the process of talking about that, I would say, let's let our candidates and our representatives know what we want instead of just what we don't want. And so I would solicit people to, email me or put something in the comments section, letting me know what they wanted for us collectively. And it's funny, there was stuff about education, there was stuff about free speech, there was stuff about healthcare, there was stuff on every topic that you would imagine people would write about. But as I tried to sort of boil it down, the answer was people wanted fairness. They just wanted fairness. And I thought, wow, that is so great. If that is our North Star, we can do that.
Absolutely. And I mean, because this kind of connects with, in my opinion, how well you do crowd work, whether it's on stage connecting with an audience or using your platforms. I think that you're a stand-up that has a unique skill to connect with the audience, because sometimes when there's crowd engagement, it can really kind of tank a show. But I just want to tell you, yours is the most impressive I've seen in real time.
Oh, that's very nice to hear. Thank you. I started out in Boston in 1979. And this was a period where there was sort of a renaissance in stand-up comedy. The form, obviously, of stand-up comedy has been around, since we were in the caves, I assume. But audiences had sort of lost interest in that form. And so it got reignited right around that time. And it's funny because we were all doing, to some degree, our version of what we had seen on like the Tonight Show. And so there was this tendency to have, and I think audiences were doing what they thought audiences did too. Because sometimes you'd go on stage and people would shout out stuff at you, and clearly they believed they were supposed to. Like, they weren't trying to be mean. They just thought that's what they were supposed to do. And I don't know where they got that idea, but you're not. That's not what you're supposed to do. But anyway, so everybody went on stage armed with heckler lines. And somewhere along the way, some of these people decided that the heckler lines were so good that they wanted to be heckled so that they could use their heckler lines. And it just set up this ridiculously adversarial relationship between the audience and the comic. I don't know. It was just sort of the wrong path. But I literally was the only person I knew who didn't do that. I didn't want to have that relationship with the audience. I like talking to audience members, but it's not mean or antagonistic. It's fun. In fact, sometimes people come up to me and they go, "Oh, I saw you years ago and you picked on me." I go, "Picked on you? I don't pick on people." I go, "We had an exchange." But now sometimes people will say to me, "Oh, do you remember the night of the blah, blah, blah?" And I'm like, gee, I don't. And that's partly because I think from stress, I'm losing my memory, but also just too many years now. It's too much to organize in my brain any longer.
Well, we're all thankful you're keeping at it and touring, and people in the Lake Geneva and Milwaukee area will be able to see you very soon. But for today, Paula, thank you for joining me on Lake Effect.
Thank you so much. It was great talking with you.
Paula Poundstone is a comedian, a frequent panelist for NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, and host of the podcast Nobody Listens to Paula Poundstone. She'll be performing at the Geneva Stage in Lake Geneva on June 6th. Poundstone joined Lake Effect's Audrey Nowakowski. And that wraps up today's show. Thank you so much for being here with us. I'm Joy Powers. If you missed any of Lake Effect this week, you can find all of our conversations at WUWM.com. If you'd like to take the show on the go, you can download the Lake Effect podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Tomorrow on Lake Effect, we'll hear from the new Coast Guard commander for Lake Michigan. And we'll revisit another favorite Bubbler Talk story in honor of the series' 10th anniversary. Thanks so much for joining us right here on listener-supported 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.